This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded in New South Wales, Australia, August 2006. The Hollow Needle. Further Adventures of Arsene Lupin by Maurice Leblanc. Translated by Alexander Teixeira de Matos. Chapter 3. The Corpse. At 6 o'clock in the evening, having finished all he had to do, Monsieur Filleul, accompanied by Monsieur Bredouille, his clerk, stood waiting for the carriage, which was to take him back to Dieppe. He seemed restless, nervous. Twice over he asked, "You haven't seen anything of young Beautrelet, I suppose?" "No, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction, I can't say I have." "Where on earth can he be? I haven't set eyes on him all day." Suddenly he had an idea, handed his portfolio to Bredouille, ran round the château, and made for the ruins. Isidore Beautrelet was lying near the cloisters, flat on his face, with one arm folded under his head, on the ground carpeted with pine needles. He seemed drowsing. "Hullo, young man, what are you doing here? Are you asleep?" "I'm not asleep. I've been thinking." "Ever since this morning?" "Ever since this morning." "It's not a question of thinking. One must see into things first. Study facts, look for clues, establish connecting links. The time for thinking comes after, when one pieces all that together and discovers the truth." "Yes, I know. That's the usual way, the right one, I dare say. Mine is different. I think first. I try, above all, to get the general hang of the case, if I may so express myself. Then I imagine a reasonable and logical hypothesis, which fits in with the general idea. And then, and not before, I examine the facts to see if they agree with my hypothesis." "That's a funny method, and a terribly complicated one." "It's a sure method, Monsieur Filleul, which is more than can be said of yours." "Come, come, facts are facts." "With your ordinary sort of adversary, yes. But given an enemy endowed with a certain amount of cunning, the facts are those which he happens to have selected. Take the famous clues upon which you base your inquiry. Why, he was at liberty to arrange them as he liked. And you see where that can lead you, into what mistakes and absurdities, when you are dealing with a man like Arsène Lupin. Holmlock Shears himself fell into the trap." "Arsène Lupin is dead." "No matter. His gang remains, and the pupils of such a master are masters themselves." Monsieur Filleul took Isidore by the arm, and, leading him away, "Words, young man, words. Here is something of more importance. Listen to me. Ganimard is otherwise engaged at this moment, and will not be here for a few days. On the other hand, the Comte de Gesvres has telegraphed to Holmlock Shears, who has promised his assistance next week. Now, don't you think, young man, that would be a feather in our cap if we were able to say to those two celebrities, on the day of their arrival, 'Awfully sorry, gentlemen, but we couldn't wait. The business is done.'" It was impossible for Monsieur Filleul to confess helplessness with greater candour. Beautrelet suppressed a smile, and, pretending not to see through the worthy magistrate, replied, "I confess, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction, that, if I was not present at your inquiry just now, it was because I hoped that you would consent to tell me the results. May I ask what you have learned?" "Well, last night at 11 o'clock, the 3 gendarmes whom Sergeant Quevillon had left on guard at the château received a note from the sergeant telling them to hasten with all speed to Ouville, where they are stationed. They at once rode off, and when they arrived at Ouville, they discovered that they had been tricked, that the order was a forgery, and that there was nothing for them to do but return to Ambrumésy. This they did, accompanied by Sergeant Quevillon. But they were away for an hour and a half, and, during this time, the crime was committed." "In what circumstances?" "Very simple circumstances indeed. A ladder was removed from the farm buildings and placed against the second story of the château. A pane of glass was cut out, and a window opened. 2 men, carrying a dark lantern, entered Mademoiselle de Gesvres' room and gagged her before she could cry out. Then, after binding her with cords, they softly opened the door of the room in which Mademoiselle de Saint Véran was sleeping. Mademoiselle de Gesvres heard a stifled moan, followed by the sound of a person struggling. A moment later, she saw 2 men carrying her cousin, who was also bound and gagged. They passed in front of her and went out through the window. Then Mademoiselle de Gesvres, terrified and exhausted, fainted." "But what about the dogs?" I thought Monsieur le Gesvres had brought 2 almost wild sheepdogs, which were let loose at night." "They were found dead, poisoned." "By whom? Nobody could get near them." "It's a mystery. The fact remained that the 2 men crossed the ruins without let or hindrance and went out by the little door which we have heard so much about. They passed through the copsewood, following the line of the disused quarries. It was not until they were nearly half a mile from the château, at the foot of the tree known as the Great Oak, that they stopped and executed their purpose." "If they came with the intention of killing Mademoiselle de Saint Véran, why didn't they murder her in her room?" "I don't know. Perhaps the incident that settled their determination only occurred after they left the house. Perhaps the girl succeeded in releasing herself from her bonds. In my opinion, the scarf which was picked up was used to fasten her wrists. In any case, the blow was struck at the foot of the Great Oak. I have collected indisputable proofs." "But the body?" "The body has not been found, but there is nothing excessively surprising in that. As a matter of fact, the trail which I followed brought me to the church at Varengeville and the old cemetery perched on the top of the cliff. From there it is a sheer precipice, a fall of over 300 feet to the rocks and the sea below. In a day or two, a stronger tide than usual will cast up the body on the beach." "Obviously. This is all very simple." "Yes, it is all very simple and doesn't trouble me in the least. Lupin is dead, his accomplices heard of it and, to revenge themselves, have killed Mademoiselle de Saint Véran. These are facts which did not even require checking. But Lupin?" "What about him?" "What has become of him? In all probability, his confederates removed his corpse at the same time they carried away the girl. But what proof have we? None at all, any more than of his staying in the ruins, or of his death, or of his life. And that is the real mystery, Monsieur Beautrelet. The murder of Mademoiselle Raymonde solves nothing. On the contrary, it only complicates matters. What has been happening during the past 2 months at the Château d'Ambrumésy? If we don't clear up the riddle, young man, others will give us the go-by." "On what day are those others coming?" "Wednesday, Tuesday, perhaps." Beautrelet seemed to be making an inward calculation, and then declared: "Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction, this is Saturday. I have to be back at school on Monday evening. Well, if you will have the goodness to be here at 10 o'clock exactly on Monday morning, I will try to give you the key to the riddle." "Really, Monsieur Beautrelet? Do you think so? Are you sure?" "I hope so, at any rate." "And where are you going now?" "I am going to see if the facts consent to fit in with the general theory which I am beginning to perceive." "And if they don't fit in?" "Well, Monsieur le Juge d'Instruction," said Beautrelet, with a laugh, "then it will be their fault and I must look for others which will prove more tractable. Till Monday, then?" "Till Monday." A few minutes later, Monsieur Filleul was driving towards Dieppe, while Isidore mounted a bicycle which he had borrowed from the Comte de Gesvres and rode off along the road to Yerville and Caudebec-en-Caux. There was one point in particular on which the young man was anxious to form a clear opinion, because this just appeared to him to be the enemy's weakest point. Objects of the size of the 4 Rubens pictures cannot be juggled away. They were bound to be somewhere. Granting that it was impossible to find them for the moment, might one not discover the road by which they had disappeared? What Beautrelet surmised was that the 4 pictures had undoubtedly been carried off in the motor car, but that, before reaching Caudebec, they were transferred to another car, which had crossed the Seine either above Caudebec or below it. Now, the first horseboat down the stream was at Quillebeuf, a greatly frequented ferry, and consequently dangerous. Upstream there was the ferry boat at La Meilleraie, a large but lonely market town, lying well off the main road. By midnight, Isidore had covered the 35 or 40 miles to La Meilleraie and was knocking at the door of an inn by the waterside. He slept there, and in the morning questioned the ferrymen. They consulted the counterfoils in the traffic book. No motor car had crossed on Thursday, the 23rd of April. "A horse-drawn vehicle, then," suggested Beautrelet. "A cart? A van?" "No, not either." Isidore continued his inquiries all through the morning. He was on the point of leaving for Quillebeuf when the waiter of the inn at which he had spent the night said: "I came back from my 13 days' training on the morning of which you are speaking, and I saw a cart, but it did not go across." "Really?" "No, they unloaded it onto a flat boat, a barge of sorts, which was moored to the wharf." "And where did the cart come from?" "Oh, I knew it at once. It belonged to Master Vatinel, the carter." "And where does he live?" "At Louvetot." Beautrelet consulted his military